Welcome back, beautiful people. This is another episode of An Untold Narrative, where we host creators from all around the world to talk about subjects that matter to you most. And this week's guest was episode 7 of An Untold Narrative, returning now on episode 117, Mr. Che Anderson, who is known most for doing the most amount of things. I think you're on like 9 different advisory boards. You have a full-time job for UMass. You have been part of different art battles and hosting and emceeing. You have traveled the globe. You have done a zillion things. So, and most importantly, you're like one of my best friends. So today's podcast is a little bit different because we're just going to shoot the shit and we're just going to have a conversation around the current state of things because I think it's important. And so, Che, how are you? And when I ask that question, I mean, how are you?
Bro, you know what, man? I'm balancing both being tired and being happy. And it's really cool to be able to say that, like I'm learning what actually brings joy into my life and, fills the proverbial cup. And today's just been a long day, dog. So I'm feeling it today. But I'm really excited to be here and holding space with you.
I appreciate that. I did have to block off in your calendar to make sure that we snuck this in amongst a lot of those things. When people rattle off your, let's call it quote unquote resume, life resume, right? Like all the different shit you do. How does that make you feel? Is it like, oh, I'm proud of that? Or is it like, oh my God, I'm so tired even thinking of that?
You know, man, it's I used to feel like it's such a weird response, but I used to feel annoyed because in my mind I felt like I wasn't doing enough. Like I was like, oh yeah, I'm doing this stuff, but like this is only the beginning. Wait until you hear what I'm doing in 10 years or in 20 years. And now I'm in a space where like I realize how like privileged I am to do a lot of these things and how much of an honor it is to be associated with so many of the organizations that I've been able to sit with and serve. And it's just really cool, man. Like I can't even pretend like it isn't. Like I'm excited whenever people do get to rattle some of that stuff off.
So for any creator listening who is maybe doing a lot of things, right, because they're trying to quote unquote, make it. I mean, I think just like in the retrospective of things, like we can both gladly say that we've made it and we've had success, some sort of success. Now there are younger people or maybe even older people who are just getting going and have started doing a lot of different things to really kind of start building their path and figuring out their way towards happiness. Like, is there a moment that was like a light switch for you to go from, oh, wait until you see what I do in 10 years to now just having peace with that? Because I feel like that burnout is going to catch up to those people who are on that, like the infancy stages, right? Like they see people who have done amazing things and they know it takes a lot of work and they know it takes a lot of different projects and they know it takes a lot of different networking, but there's a cost to that. And so do you have like a piece of advice that like helped you get over the hump and like have this different perspective?
Yeah, I don't want to pretend like I've been in this like headspace for a very long time. You know what I mean? Like it's very, very recent, right? I'm not gonna be like, oh yeah, for years now I've been on this Zen. Like no. Back in December of this past year, I was at DesignerCon, I was at DCon, and a friend of mine, Jason Keem, who's a really talented artist and just an even better person. He and I were chatting over the course of the few days. And I think on day 2, he saw me and he was just like, hey, bro, you okay? And I was like, yeah, I'm good, I'm good. And he like stopped me and goes, no, but seriously, like, are you all right? And I said, honestly, man, my mind is in a lot of places right now. But I'll be cool. And he said, I'm going to say something to you that I've kind of wanted to say to you for a while. But I haven't known how to say it. I said, yeah, sure. What's up? And he said, you don't have to prove that you deserve to exist. You just exist. You are. You already are. So you don't have to like, do all the stuff. He's like, maybe you like it. I'm like, that's cool. He goes, but sometimes I see all the stuff and I'm like, dude, I'm tired looking at it. I could imagine you doing it. And it really was like a beautiful sort of light bulb moment for me to realize like so much of the stuff was like trying to ensure that like I wasn't squandering the opportunities that I had, that I wasn't letting my mom's time and my grandma's time for all the work they put into like my brother and I go to waste. You know, for all the mentors who poured into me and the people who took extra time, like I wanted them to know that I valued what they gave me. And so it was like I just got to work and work and work to show that. Um, and so it was nice to just have that affirmation that like I'm doing. I don't have to prove or anything else. I am, and that's enough. And there's beauty in that.
Yes, to all of that. I was gonna say, like, I think there's something between, similarity between you and I of like, we do a lot of the things for subconsciously, maybe even from our family's perspective. Like, I always think about like growing up, not like immigrating to this country, not having a lot of money, and therefore I like work tremendously hard because I'm like, oh, I gotta buy my parents a retirement home. I like can never be poor like that. Like, I'm like so terrified. Like I'm like fearful of it. And so therefore
Yeah.
it actually is the root cause for me of a lot of the things that I do. And it sounds like maybe that's part of your journey as well. But you figured out now how to just, like you said, it's okay to just exist and be at peace with that. And you said something earlier that's really interesting of like, I'm just focused on the now, and I'm not like dreaming of like what's happening in 5 to 10 years. And so have you thought about like, because very recently got asked this question of like, do you ever dream of like your future of 10 years, of 5 years? So it's actually really fascinating that you brought this up. And like, I was like, no, I'm like, I really just take it week by week and month by month and max like a year out. Like I have my yearly goals, and like, I don't really dream about like things in the 5 years. Like, I don't think that far. Are
Yeah.
you the same way? Have you like pulled back from that? Like, is that a negative? Like, cause should people be dreamers?
I'll be honest, man. When I was like in my 20s, I had like a 10-year plan. Like I like wrote down like a full, like, all right, I'm like 24. When I'm 34, here are all the things I'm gonna do.
Mm.
And I think I shared with you a while ago. I found that plan like a couple years ago, and I was just like, what was I doing, bro? Just like, what was I thinking about? Um, and what it was like it was everything that I thought I was supposed to have done by my 30s, right? Like I was like, I plan on being married. I plan on being a dad. I plan on owning a house. I plan on having a master's degree or an advanced degree. I plan on being over six figures because that's the era of life where you're supposed to be over. You know what I mean? Like you have this idea of who you're supposed to be based on societal goals or whatever kind of norms. Um, and like yeah, to be honest, I got a lot of those things accomplished, but I realize now like that's not the point, right? Like for me, like that's not what life's about. It's not just about checking boxes until you die. Um, and if it is, that's just not, in my opinion, a very good existence. You know what I mean? Like we have so much opportunity to make impact and do things, but also to truly be happy. Like I used to shy away from the word happiness. In my mind, happiness was something you earn. You can't just have it. Like how dare you just have it?
Mm.
But I've realized now, like it isn't that. There shouldn't be like a grind to happiness. There shouldn't be a grind to joy. You know, like you deserve it. You have to find it. I literally got a tattoo recently that says "Find your joy" on my arm, and it's written in a way where if someone's walking behind me, they can read it. But if I hold it up like this, I can read it because it's not just about having it; it's about spreading it.
Mm.
You know, um, and so like I don't think of things that rigidly anymore of like I got to do this in 5 years, I got to do that in 10 years. I think of it more of like okay, 5 years from now I'm going to be almost 40, and I'm like one, that's nuts, but two, like who do I want to be at 40? More important than what do I want to be doing or what do I want to have accomplished? Like who do I want to be as a person? What's important to me? What kind of lifestyle do I want to lead? Like that to me is what I'm thinking of in 5 years. Beyond that, I'm just trying to figure out what's for lunch tomorrow and like, are my friends cool? You know what I mean? Like, is my family healthy? That's kind of it.
Yes to all of it, but like, how do people? Because I recently, a few weeks back was in Indianapolis and for a trip, and I was like amongst all these random people. I don't even know if Indiana's considered the Midwest or not, but all these like different people, right? And I was like, man, like these seem like just like normal people, right? Like I don't know what they do. They just fit the bill of like normal, right? And I'm like, I feel like these people are stressed out for like normal life stressors. And then I like think about my life and my stressors and what kind of annoys me and the things like that. And it's like so much different, right? It's like our annoyances and our stressors come from a place of progression and like wanting to like find betterness or find happiness. And like these normal people, I feel like maybe aren't like conscious of it, or at least maybe this is the way that I was thinking about that. I'm like, oh, they have like no perspective or like whatever. And ultimately, like I think about, part of the reason why I do this podcast even is to like educate people who are coming up primarily in footwear design, but let's call it any creative field, of like avoiding those normalcy feelings, right? Of like, oh, I got to get a raise. Oh, I got to get a promotion. Oh, I got to buy a house. Literally everything you listed. And so how do people flip the script? Like, right. Like that is like the ultimate extraction of like, how does your normal everyday person starting out like avoid these things, or do they have to go through it and just learn for themselves? Because I think that's part of the equation.
I think that like a lot of people, when trying to, we live in a world right now that has so many stressors. Like there's so many macro things that are happening all the time. Like I know that I probably read way more news than you read, just based on our conversation as friends. Like I know that I'm just consuming so much news. But there's so many things happening for people to stress over, right? And so often people are trying to figure out how to address a thing that isn't actually like the macro problem, right? I don't know that most people want to own a house. I think that people want financial freedom. I think people want comfort. I think people want their own space, right? I think people want safety. And so that looks like owning a house. But I don't think that people are like, oh my God, I want to pay $30,000 on a water heater. I think they're just like, no. This is the way I get this thing, right? I want my kids to go to a better school. Like that happens to be in this neighborhood, which has his house, right? I don't think people are really focused on just like having a ton of money. I think that people want to do things. They want to travel more, right? They want freedom for their family. They want to be able to make sure people in their family don't want for anything or don't need for anything. They want to have the best foods so they can live a healthier lifestyle, right? But what does that look like in this particular country in our system? Well, that looks like more money, right? And so when we talk about things, I think just from a state of getting to the point faster, we say like, oh yeah, I need this. I need a raise. It's less about that. It's not about the title and stuff. Like that stuff comes with the raise because like that's how you earn. But that's not, I think, people's desire, you know? Like for myself, like, yeah, like, do I want more money? I do. But like when I break it down, I'm like, I just want to see more of the world. I want to make sure that if my mom needs something, I can take care of that for her. I want to make sure that if I do have a family, then that we can do things as a family that I couldn't do growing up. You know what I'm saying? Like, so I feel like, and I think honestly, if that's the conversation we would have more as people, we'd break through a lot of the bullshit. Right. But because we talk about these surface level things, that's where like a lot of contentiousness starts, right? And it's like, you need more money. You make way more money than that person. And it's like, no, it's not about the money. I want my kid to be able to do this thing. I have a sick parent. I want to make sure they're not worrying about footing that bill and they can get the care they need. People can understand that. That's where the empathy comes in. But when you leave it at that surface level conversation, I think you end up in this idea of like, well, these people need that and they only think of this, and these people think of this because they live here. So now we're all fighting similar battles.
There is, you said there's a lot going on in the world, and it actually causes, I think, a lot of anxiety, animosity, it influences how people react, even to the littlest things, even in a workplace environment. I think you and I are a little bit more optimistic about things usually, and don't let it affect us as much. I specifically avoid it affecting me by not consuming any of it, as you mentioned. You do consume it. How are you able to keep your like positive perspective? Because you're like got a couple toes in the politics side of things, still. I think that's still deep at your core of like interests.
Mm-hmm.
We have geopolitics, which are even larger than just the United States. We have wars going on. We have, job losses. Tons of people getting laid off today. Like, where are you in all of this? Like, how are you? Where do you exist in today's times of like consumption of the news?
I mean, I still wake up in the morning and consume probably like 5 or so news outlets, like first thing in the morning. Um, there's a period where I didn't do that this year, and you would think I would feel like calm from it, but instead I was like, "What's happening?" You know. Um, I think that part of why I'm able to remain as optimistic as I am is because at my core, as much as I sometimes get annoyed by a lot of people's actions, I believe in people.
Mm.
You know, I think that the majority of people are good. I think that we just end up getting into these different forms of tribalism where we focus on ourselves before we focus on anything else, and we don't realize that in general there are these macro geopolitical issues that, like, if we pull together we can solve them, right? Like, there are sort of beautiful resolutions to a lot of things. Like, and don't get me wrong, like, I think that there are times for things like protests, there are times for things like revolution, right? But I think that those things are never like the first answer. Those are things that come over time when you realize, like, okay, well, we're not going to get to some sort of peaceful resolution here. um, but I just, like, I see, when we talk about things like housing and like how many more people are unhoused and dealing with like not having just a affordable place to be, that's a large issue we need to address. Um, and I don't know that it's going to happen on like a city to city or state to state level. That's like a massive issue. When I was recently over in Europe, and they have the same issues in Lisbon, and they have the same issues in Paris. And I'm sure if you go to any major city, they're the same issues. So you can't just go, oh, this is a Northeast issue or an American issue. No, everyone's feeling this. Like,
Mm.
that's a systems problem we have to address. Um, so like, there's like that. We talk about things like food and how many people still live in food deserts, and it's like, that should be something we should be able to resolve. When you see that massive fast food companies have gone up 300% in their prices, and it's like, there's no reason for me to pay $30 for a McDonald's meal. I love McDonald's fries. Big shout to those fries. But paying that much money for something that's supposed to be quick, easy, affordable is crazy, right?
I literally just spent $19 on Taco Bell a few weeks back, and I was like, I don't know how Taco Bell could be $19 because I remember it being $6 and I was stuffed.
Dude, for $20, you could feed like you and like 8 of your boys. Like, that was the whole point of Taco Bell, right? Like, you could like feed the fam for $20. But you know what I mean? I think that, so when I see those things, for me, it's more just like, how are we getting to a point where we can have the right people at a table to have real discourse?
Mm.
I think that's what's missing. I think that we've hit this point in society where, because of a lot of factors, we prefer to be polarizing than we prefer to figure out how to get to some sort of agreement. We prefer to sit firmly on the sides and on the lines instead of figuring out how we can find what connects us better. And so because of that, it's hard to come to resolution. Everyone's like hardlining. Um, and so, like, when you see that that's the case, I think optimistically, I'm like, well, there's going to be a tipping point where folk will get it. I hope it's not too late, but I am hopeful that we get to that point, just because, I feel like there's still more things to do. And I can't fathom that we're sitting on the brink of the end of existence, all because we can't have conversation.
I mean, it's a scary place to be, right? It's
For sure.
and it theoretically could happen. So
For sure.
that's the even crazier part. You mentioned offline just before we started recording that like recently you've been asked the question a lot of like what's next, and like you went on this this beautiful segment there of like this core thing that like clearly you can just hear it in your voice that you're passionate about. Like, hey, this is like a issue that like we need to talk about. We blah, blah blah. Is it something like you're focused on personally, or like you want to strive to build towards a solution or help in that solution? Or is it because you're so in peace in the moment right now that you're not thinking about what's next or how to solve this major problem? Or like, how are you juggling those two worlds? Because they seem polarizing.
Yeah. I was saying to you earlier, like, I got asked by like 3 or 4 people today, like, so like you do these different things. What's next? And I'm kind of just like not like happiness is next, right? Like I've been running, not as fast as you're running because I don't know how you got so fast, dog. Like you just, I look at your times and I'm like, I'm not getting there. That's fine. But it's not about, right? Like that. Like for me, it's just like the beauty of running has been so interesting to find, um, to clear my head, to challenge myself physically, but really just to like take space for myself. And it's like having a weird conversation with my body, which is really cool. And I think finding that has given me even more of an opportunity to dive into that idea of Kaizen, right? That like idea of getting incrementally better every day. And when you have something that allows you to do that, I think that focusing on things that are way too far out there seem trivial
Mm.
because you're just focused on like, all right, tomorrow I'll be better than I was today, and I hope today I'm better than I was yesterday. And in the same vein, I think that with all these massive sort of things happening around this, you want to be a part of the solution, right? And so I think that I try to just find ways to do things that I believe are going to help me make impact, whether it be in my direct community or my greater community, and that can mean so many different things. But that's important. But then beyond that, I think learning to be okay with the fact that like I can't pretend like I'm Superman. At the end of the day, I can do what I can do. And a friend of mine, Gary, introduced me to this term, level best, in the last couple of years. And he said, a lot of people talk about giving 110% every day. And he goes, and it sounds good, but it's impossible. Literally, no one has 110% to give every day. But the reality is that if on Monday you had 110% and you gave 110%, well then all right, that's your best for the day. But if on Tuesday you had 40% and you give 40%, that day you gave your level best. That is the best you could have done.
Mm.
That should be applauded and praised the same as when you gave your 110, because that's all you had. And years ago, I'd have gone, that's silly. You only gave 40%, step it up. And I understand now that the reality is we live in a world where so many things are being thrown at us. You might only have that 40. And good on you for giving it, because some people would give 20 and keep the other 20 for themselves. And candidly, I'd probably advocate keeping, at least 5 for yourself.
Mm.
But there's beauty in those people who get up day in and day out, whether they have it or don't, and try to give it their all. And
There,
so I think that's what I'm learning.
there's a lot to be said about the people who do and are a little bit more on the resilient side of like, I'm going to just give whatever that best percentage is that day. My struggle with it in the rebuttal question is like when I can only give 30 or 40%, right? Like for whatever reason, it could be external, it could be internal. I just don't have it that day. I like struggle with like, I should be giving 100% because this is whether it's even in the job, right? This is what I'm getting paid to do. So like, how can I not show up and give 100%? I'm only giving 30%. And I like internally, I'm like, no, like there's like this, it's, I don't know, self-inflicted pressure of like, no, I gotta show up and I gotta do all this. And like, that's always been my battle of like understanding what my limits are. And I definitely need to like pause a little bit more and understand and respect the fact that, hey, today's 30 or 40%, but it means that tomorrow's going to get back up to 80 or 90 or 100.
This brand new water bottle, full water bottle. I can't give you 100% of this water bottle now. Quite literally. Right? Like that you can't have 100, like it doesn't have it. Right? And so in theory, when you're able to give this 80% or whatever it is, that's all you could have given for that day. Now when you go and refill, however you refill, whatever it is that fills your proverbial cup, like boom, all right, cool, we're back at 100. But just simple physics and reality is I can no longer give you the 100. Like I think that's as simple as it is. You can't be upset about what doesn't exist. And I think that, but again, you and I have firmly brought into, for better or worse, what American capitalist society is. Right? Like we're gonna work and we're gonna work hard and we're gonna work harder and we're gonna earn and we're gonna do and at some point the hope is that maybe you have perspective enough to like pause and be like, okay, wait, hold on. This doesn't make sense. I've done it. I've done the thing, and like, it's both of us have had, varying levels of success at our still fairly young ages, and yet I think we both hit that realization point of like, oh no, this just doesn't make sense for me to also be a well-rounded person. Could I be a good worker? For sure. Could I be productive? Yep. Could I help increase the bottom line of an institution or company? Yep. Got that. Can I do that while maintaining my sanity, my physical health, my mental health? Nah, not all of it. So you gotta take what you can when you can.
You've always said something to me, and I know you didn't come up with the quote, but that's always resonated with me over the past couple of years, and that is, you can have it all, you just can't have it all at once. And
shout to Dean Jackson for that
one. And that literally fits right into what we're talking about here. And for those listening on Spotify or Apple, Che literally opened a Dasani water bottle and chugged it, and then there was probably 85% left in there. If you're not watching on YouTube, so just for context, that was the visual. And Dasani water tastes like trash, but that's okay. We're going to move past it. And it's a beautiful time.
Dasani water tastes like it was sitting in a water gun before they put it in the bottle.
Yes. I mean, literally my like childhood water, like hose water, tastes better than Dasani water.
For sure. 1,000%. But if you guys need help, I got you.
I want to pivot a little bit to sneakers, because you obviously have close ties amongst the industry in varying ways. You don't work in the industry, but you have ties and connections. You even offline were mentioning, hey, I got invited to this dinner, blah, blah, blah. Like, I'm kind of peopled out, but like, it'll be really cool. And like, it's great to get invited and have a seat at these tables and stuff like that. So you have these close ties, and like, you have a ton of sneakers. I'm trying to have this conversation more because I think it's the most effed up time me in my existence has experienced in the footwear industry, of like consumerism, like types of product, innovation within the space, collaborations are exhausting. Like, what is your overall take? Like, it's very rare that you like get excited over sneakers. I feel like these days, obviously you get gifted sneakers. Obviously you have close ties to certain brands which gift you other pairs and stuff like that. But like, where are you from like a holistic perspective? Are you just like, this is all trash, or like, do you have hope?
I think, so one of my friends, Tony, is a comedian. Shout to Tony Loud. And he has this bit he would do about Oreo cookies, and how before the pandemic, there were like 3 flavors of Oreo cookies, right? It was regular, there was double stuff, and there was like the golden ones. And that you fast forward to the end of the pandemic, we got 94 flavors of Oreo cookies, right? They have tiramisu Oreos, right? And I love that commentary and that joke. But I do think that within the general brands of consumerism, they understand, if we just make something for everyone, people will find the thing that they like and obsess over it. And I think that that's what the footwear industry has become. It's gone from like, let's give people quality products. Let's have quality stories that tie into why this product exists. Let's make sure that there's something that differentiates this from our competitors, but also from the other silhouettes and SKUs within our own company. To let's just throw a bunch of stuff out there. And, oh, look, you don't like this color of this shoe? We're going to give you 9,000 other colors of the same shoe. We're not going to change anything else about it, but the color's different. Oh, wait a minute. You like that shoe in pink on this material? What if we give you pink in this material? Same exact shoe, right? And people try to justify it. We're like, no, you don't understand. This suede is different than this nubuck, which is different than this leather. And it's like, that's the same thing, fam. It's the same exact shoe, right? Oh, you went from a hot pink to a lava pink? That's the same thing. You're trying to sell me the same product. And I think that it's lazy. And yet, it sounds like people buy them, right? And so, to some extent, I wonder how much of it falls on the consumer for continuing to consume. I think it's frustrating, but I also think it's why certain brands and certain collaborations rise to the top, right? Because it's hard to gauge whether something is genuine or not, but some things feel more genuine than others. Right? Some collaborations are actual collaborations where you can see they went in and they tried to buck certain trends. They tried to bring back different silhouettes. They tried to build something brand new and do some storytelling around why this product matters. And for me, that stuff is beautiful. It's timeless because you can always go back to it and go, oh, this represents this thing. So many other things are flash in the pan, quick drops. They're hot for a second, and then who cares? There's another thing just like it a month later. And so as a consumer, right to your point, as someone who doesn't work in the industry, I feel like I'm constantly bombarded with stuff, and I'm just like, I don't see why this matters.
Mm.
Like, I don't see what the point of it is. But every once in a while, something comes out, and I'm like, yo, that's dope. Or I hate this, but I like that they did something different, which is also okay. I think there's something about that. Someone else will like it. I don't have to like it to go. Conceptually, I see what they were doing is not for me, but I like that they tried something different.
Mm.
I just wish more brands would do that.
For me, the closest example, because it literally came out 24 hours ago, is Balenciaga collaborating with Under Armour, which obviously the headlines are like, can Balenciaga make Under Armour cool, right? Like that's just like the headlines across the board. And so like, whether you love it or hate it, you have to ask the question of like, that's interesting that those two brands can coexist. Whether it's successful or not, or whatever the outcome is, maybe there is rationale underneath it that like nobody's digging into. I personally haven't discovered that yet, but I'm just headline reading here. And like, in your mind, one, where does that resonate? And then two, like, is there a different example that you've been really excited about lately?
I mean, I do think that we're in this really interesting world of trying to figure out what's cool, right? Like, I, you know, when you look at something like the sort of like big brands, right? You look at like a Nike and all the varying Travis Scott collaborations, right? And you wonder if Travis Scott's name wasn't attached to it, would these move in the way that they move? I would assume not, right? We'll never know, right? Because we don't live in that universe where it doesn't exist. But the reality is there's a bit of cool that he lends to something that can't necessarily be quantified in the right way. But like, cool, okay, that's cool because of Travis Scott, right? Then you see like a New Balance collaboration with like a Joe Freshgoods, and like Joe keeps winning awards for his storytelling because he's found a way to be authentically himself, candidly, to be authentically Black in his storytelling, and the brand has just been like, do your thing, right? Like that's a different sort of thing. But then you think about things from like the last couple of years, like the big red boot phenomenon, right? No one would have called that. That didn't seem to make sense, right? But it was interesting in how it caught on and how like meme culture now impacts everything else, you know? And so like I see those things and I'm just like, man, these are interesting, right? They're interesting sort of bits for your story. And I think as I look more at shoes, obviously like, and not just because it's a space that you're also in, I'm so curious how Web3 and digital plays a role into footwear, right? And like, just to not make it seem like I'm just talking to you because of the brand, like the Artifact Nike stuff has also been really interesting, right? And I saw recently like a rumor that they're going to actually release the Artifact sneakers on the sneakers app. And I think that that's horrible, right? Like you sold this bill of goods to a bunch of consumers that this is the way you get this thing. It just takes one release to undo all the good sort of you did prior. And I'm very, very curious to see what happens because it doesn't only impact a Nike. Then everyone else that would have consumed sort of Web3 based shoes are going to look and go, wait a minute, am I really buying this thing that's only exclusive for us? Or in a couple years, are you going to release it to everyone else? And now it's sort of less valuable for those who are consuming for that matter. I don't know, but I think it begets a really interesting discourse. So that I'm paying a lot of attention to. I'm also interested in a lot of brands are bringing back silhouettes they haven't used in years. And I'm curious to see how that lands as, people are way more conscious about the impact that sneakers have on your feet, right? Like at one point it was like, I just wear them because they're cool. I don't care if they're a size too tight, which is kind of what we did and messed up our feet. So many people are like, nah, if this isn't, good on my arch to walk around, then I'm not rocking with it. And so how does that impact people over the next, 5-10 years?
The new or not the new, but the bring back of the old silhouettes is a really fascinating thing because does nostalgia still matter as much? I feel like the past, like as a whole, is losing more and more traction. Like I feel like it's less and less relevant as like the new gen. I think I heard yesterday that like the new generation is called Generation A or Generation Alpha or something like that.
Hey, Alpha, yeah.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know. And like, I don't know how much the past matters as much. And so to your point, like, it is going to be really fascinating to see what happens instead of just building something new. Like, imagine giving these creators like, hey, here's our target audience. Here are some insights. Let's build something from scratch that nobody's ever seen before.
So here's, I listen to a lot of music. I consume a ton of music. Right. You think about an artist like Shabuzi, who is like making waves as like a black artist doing country music, right? But his song, which I think is still number one on the country charts, is a remake of Jaquan's Tipsy. Right. If you don't know that, then yeah, it's just a cool song. But if you do know that, you know that it's taking from sort of this past thing. Some Sexy Red songs do similar things, right? A lot of songs interpolate or reinterpret other music. I think the past is always relevant. I think that it all depends on how you define relevant, right? Like it's like when you look at fashion trends, right? Like most trends you can date back to something 20, 30 years prior. It just kind of comes in a circle and it's reintroduced. I think music has that same sort of thing. I think architecture, right? People borrow from different components and time periods. I think the big question is, do people care about the story of how it came to be? And like you and I have chatted about that a lot over the last couple of years, right? It's like how do you gauge if people care about this product because of all that went into it, or because of who said they should care about it? And I think that, yes, there are people who are always going to consume for the sake of consuming because they're consumers. But I think there's another layer of consumers who are very much interested in why this thing exists and what impacts it has, and who kind of worked on it and why that makes it exciting. Yeah.
I like how we went down this rabbit hole of just like random footwear thoughts, and that's really at the beginning of this podcast. That's exactly where I wanted to end up. I knew we'd talk about the deep shit up front, and then we kind of just trickle our way to a bunch of nonsense of two dudes just talking about who the fuck knows, because we could be dead wrong tomorrow. But
Oh, for sure.
But no, I love that. Hey, I want to know like what's outside of like your daily peace and your happiness, and I know you're training for a marathon and all this stuff. Is there anything else that's like really top of mind for you, in the sense of like, you talk to a lot of young people, you talk to a lot of, professionals, you talk to a lot of aspiring creatives. What's like something top of mind, whether it's advice or something that you've been thinking about to help people? Is there anything that like comes to mind? I always try to find new ways or new perspectives, and I know you think differently than most, to help other people. Because I wish that when I was, 21, 22 years old, I listened to something that really just like sparked something in me. Right. And so is there anything that you would leave the audience with as we wrap up?
Yeah. There are two things. So I'm giving a talk this weekend to, I think, 300 high school students. And I'll be very candid. I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to say yet. I'm going to start figuring that out tomorrow.
Classic.
I mean, you know me. But I was asked to speak about creativity, specifically creativity, which I love, because it doesn't pigeonhole someone into being an artist, right? I'm not an artist per se, but I'm a creative. Um, and I'm meant to sort of inspire their interest in continuing with their creativity. And just 2 weeks ago, I did a panel for this organization in Boston, ARCK, that focuses on sort of arts and culture. And as their panel moderator, we talked a lot about the role that creatives play on changing and shaping what happens in society, right? And how quite often creatives stay in their creative bubble, and they don't often come out and play in other worlds, right? You don't often hear a lot of creatives at tables discussing economic development, right? Not a lot of creatives in rooms discussing things like transportation and transportation needs. You don't hear a lot of creatives at the table for like housing and how to address mental health crises, right? And yet, creative outlets, going to the opera, having some sort of painting class, some sort of doodling opportunity, acting, improv, assist in one's mental health, right? Creatives need places to stay. They need accessible, affordable housing, the same as those who may be underprivileged do. Creatives often use public transportation because it is a cheaper and affordable way to move about cities and towns. And creatives account for one of the largest GDP percentages in our country, more so than things like infrastructure does. And so why is it that those folks aren't at these tables having these conversations, right? Some would argue they're out creating. But the reality is, when you talk about money that's assigned to creative people, to artists, to designers, it tends to be nominal compared to some other people. And it's because they're not at the table. And so for anyone that's listening and that's wondering, why is it they can't find more funding, whether they're soliciting a city or a state or others in the country or for-profit entities or foundations, I would argue that they need to find other ways, creative ways, to show up at tables where they don't believe they make sense. Right? The secret sauce for me in my career has been that. Right? I sit at tables that are stuffy and bureaucratic, and I'm a creative voice in them. And I sit at tables that are creative, and I'm a bureaucratic, stuffy voice in those. But it's to get the other side to understand that perspective. And so I think that that's major. And then the second thing I want to say is I think that I'm really grateful, more so than I think I've ever been in my life, for the people in my life who are willing to have open and honest conversation with me. Right? Me and you had a really good conversation a few weeks ago that I hope was helpful, but was also very helpful for me in a lot of ways to reflect on. And I think that what I'm very appreciative of is the friends of mine and the mentors of mine that are willing to pull me aside privately and be like, hey, fam, you should consider this, or like, you're fucking up in this way. And I think that there was a period in my life where I couldn't have taken that well. I would have beat myself up about it and been like, oh my God, I have to reorg every single thing. But the reality is that most people are going through something in their day-to-day. We don't always express it to people or at all, or even want to deal with it ourselves. But we're going through our different stories and trials and tribulations. And to have someone we care about be like, hey, yo, here's something I've noticed. Just want you to know that I notice it as someone who cares about you. And do with that which you will, I think is invaluable. And so to anyone that is currently in that space, I'm sure you have someone else around you in a space. I would just ask you and sort of behoove you to tell that person, hey, this is a thing. You know, for those that can't see me, I'm wearing this hoodie that says Invisible Pain. And it's a brand from my friend Wilfred. And he started it as an athlete, as a pro athlete, who said that he feels as though he goes through so many things, and some of his teammates and friends went through so many things and didn't have an outlet to talk about it. So they're all dealing with this invisible pain. And I challenged him and said, I think that most people are dealing with that, particularly in today's society. And that if we were able to have better discourse around it, one, the pain wouldn't be so invisible. And two, maybe we could help actually address the pain itself. And so those are kind of the two things that I would say to folks.
There is literally no better way to wrap up this podcast than those two gifts to anybody listening. So beautifully said as always. I knew you're such a spectacular speaker. And you did this last summer too, where when I asked you to give a talk and you like literally 24 hours before you're mustering up something. So good luck this weekend.
I appreciate you.
Speaking in front of 300 high school kids, I'm sure it's going to be phenomenal. Mr. Che Anderson, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate you. And thank you for joining us again on An Untold Narrative, man.
My God, thanks for having me.